Welcome to session 114 of our Mandelbulb 3D Tutorial Series within the context of an animation project. Now, what we're looking at here is the frames that were subframes that were rendered out at their full size, 1920 by 1080. And we're viewing these frames within the DJV video previewer application, which I did speak about a couple sessions ago. Now, in the previous few sessions, we spun off and we were talking about these various ways of inserting a keyframe into your keyframe stack. All right, those can be very important functions for you, and now you know about them, so that's good. And we also talked about this shadowing area within that we can see in this preview, and I made an effort to modify the dynamic fog and the ambient shadowing. I think it's improved. I'm not 100% happy with it, but for now, this is good enough. What we're seeing here is the result of 10 keyframes that have a certain number of subframes in between them, okay, such as this value right here. All right, and we are actually looking at an animation that we have documented to bring us to this point. Now, this here, for me, would be, I would refer to that as an animation series. Okay, and I like to, all right, let's do animation series, or you could call it segment, or whatever you want. And I'm going to call that, forward with right banking turn, okay? Put a little divider in there like that. All right, and my next animation sequence, now I've got to decide what I want to do, all right? And that's why we're here. So while we're looking at this preview, let's decide what to do. So as my documentation shows, we're moving forward, all right? Then we go into a right banking turn, and then we level out again. We're moving forward at all times. Now, I like the speed that I have here. Now, do keep in mind that this is DJV that is playing my subframes back at 60 frames per second. If I was to put this back down to 30, that's 30 frames per second. Now that's too slow. Now let me point out that the only reason that I had put this up to 60 is so that I get a sense for the speed of the flight through the environment. The actual speed will be 300 frames per second if I don't do anything to change that. All right. I had mentioned in a session a while back that what I intend to do is to come back into my keyframes when I get very close to my final animation. I intend to come back here and double the amount of subframes in between each keyframe, okay? So what doesn't matter what value it is, I double it. That will then get me a realistic animation speed of 60 frames per second when I put it into my video editor, okay? Now the reason that I don't do that early on now is because if I had, I would have 3,600 subframes that I would have to render in order to get a preview like this. So effectively what I've done is I've said, look, give me less subframes so that I have an easier time in reviewing the animation without getting all caught up in rendering out these vast number of keyframes that I don't really need in order to evaluate my motion, my animation events. All right? Oh, and maybe even lighting and coloring as well. All right, so keeping in mind that what I'm attempting to do here is to circumvent the amount of time involved in developing an animation by outputting fewer subframes and compensating with my, in this case, the DJV video viewer. Now you know, you can use other things beside DJV. I personally have found it a very good tool for what it's intended to do. And it's very good. And you can do a lot of stuff with it. Matter of fact, I talked about DJV in more detail in a few sessions back, which I'll put up on the screen. All right, so that brings us to a point where we want to ask ourselves, what animation do we do next? Now, there's a key point that I want to make in determining your next animation event, your next move. And I think I've mentioned this in the past, in past sessions. Sometimes you just don't know where you're going to end up. You just don't know. You have to make the move and see where you wind up. And that is the beauty about documenting, because you can revert, you can eliminate these keyframes, all right, that didn't work out for you. So, but that's what we're going to do. Now, I'm going to do a straight and level flight because forward, I did a right banking turn, I leveled out. So the sensible thing to do would be a straight level flight, okay? And as a matter of fact, if we stop this and we look at this, this is the last frame. There we go, 1800, that's the last frame of what we have rendered so far. This represents the first 10 keyframes. That is the scene that we're going to have when we come after we've leveled. All right, we've leveled up. That's our scene. So the idea here is to ask yourself, where do you want to go from here? All right. I could do a nice straight level flight. If I did, I would eventually wind up crashing into right about where my mouse is. I don't know how far away that is. With the Mandelbulb 3D, you do not have any measurements as to the distances within your Mandelbulb scene. All right, so if I went straight, I'd crash into that. All right, now what could I do? I could go straight and start flying up, okay, or I could fly forward and I could start diving down, which kind of makes sense because right about here, I can actually kind of, here, my fist is this material here. So I could do something like this. I could dive down like that. That would be pretty cool. And one of the principles that that I go by when I'm developing Mandelbulb 3D animations in this case, I like to keep the foreground. I like to keep the foreground in view. All right, and this is all foreground right here, because the foreground tends to give the viewer some grounding. It gives them a visual reference point. All right, just flying off into space. I mean, you can imagine that you're in a spaceship and you're flying in space. you don't have reference points. You have a star over there somewhere, but it's a little white dot. Or maybe you have the moon, you know, and you can continue to orient yourself to fly towards the moon. But the whole idea is in space flight, you don't have visual reference points. And I would imagine it's not something that too many people worry about. But what I like to do is to keep a visual reference point or a grounding or something that the viewer can say, okay, I know where that is. I know where that is. It's passing by. I have a sense for motion. Okay, that sort of thing. All right. So what I want to do next here is I want to do a move that is interesting, that ideally retains some of the foreground, the reference points, and that doesn't crash into anything, okay? All right, so let's pick this up in the next session. I'll see you there, and we'll animate. See you there.